Before we get into the story, leave a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. And don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. The law office smelled of expensive leather and old mahogany, the kind of place where deals worth millions were signed with barely a whisper. Madison Carter sat stiffly in the high-backed chair, her worn canvas tote bag looking absurdly out of place next to the sleek briefcase resting on the polished conference table. She tugged at the hem of her thrift store blazer, painfully aware that the lawyer seated across from her probably spent more on his tie than she made in a month. This has to be a prank, some terrible, elaborate joke. But the contract in front of her, thick as a novel and printed on cream-colored paper that practically screamed money, told her otherwise. "Miss Carter," the lawyer began, his voice smooth and impersonal, "my client is prepared to offer you $500,000 for 1 year of marriage. A business arrangement, nothing more." The number hit her like a freight train. 500,000. That was her mother's medical bills, her brother's college tuition, the mortgage on their tiny house that the bank kept threatening to foreclose. That was breathing room, hope, a future. Madison's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Clause after clause outlined expectations, boundaries, public appearances, social media protocols, and there, on page 17, underlined in bold, no physical intimacy required. This is purely contractual. You would live separately, maintain appearances at designated events, and after 12 months, the marriage would be quietly annulled. "Who is your client?" Madison asked, her throat dry. "Why me?" The lawyer's expression didn't change. "My client values discretion and authenticity. You were selected because you have no ties to high society, no agenda, and a compelling reason to honor confidentiality. As for his identity, he will reveal himself when you sign." "If you sign." Madison stared at the signature line, a thin black line that separated her current life of struggling and sleepless nights from something that felt too good to be true. What kind of person buys a wife? The answer came 3 hours later, when she sat alone in an upscale hotel suite, the signed contract tucked into her bag like a ticking bomb. The door opened without a knock. He walked in like he owned the place, which, given the level of wealth radiating from every confident step, he probably did. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back and eyes the color of a winter storm. Cold, clear, and utterly unreadable. His tailored charcoal suit fit him like a second skin, and when he looked at her, Madison felt stripped bare, as if he could see every unpaid bill and every desperate prayer she'd ever whispered. "I'm Ethan Lawson," he said simply, extending a hand. Madison shook it, his palm warm and firm, sending an unexpected jolt through her. "I know who you are. The whole country knows who you are. Ethan Lawson, billionaire venture capitalist, philanthropist, man Forbes called the most eligible bachelor 3 years running, until the tabloids started whispering that maybe he wasn't interested in women at all. Then you understand why I need this arrangement." His voice was calm, businesslike. "My board of directors believes a married man is more stable, trustworthy. My competitors use my private life, or lack thereof, as ammunition. This marriage solves a problem for both of us." Madison crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. "And what do I have to do exactly? Attend events, smile for cameras, play the role of my devoted wife. In private, you live your life. I'll live mine. No expectations beyond the contract." Her mind raced. It sounded simple. Too simple. "What happens if I mess up? If I say the wrong thing or wear the wrong dress?" Ethan's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but didn't reach his eyes. "I'll make sure you don't. You'll have a stylist, a media coach, anything you need. Think of it as a performance. You're an actress playing a part. And after a year, he met her gaze, unflinching. After a year, you walk away $500,000 richer, and I go back to running my empire without whispers following me into every boardroom. Madison wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but the weight of her mother's hospital bills crushed any hesitation. She nodded slowly. When do we start? Ethan pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside sat a diamond ring so large it looked like a prop from a movie. Next week, we'll have a private ceremony, nothing extravagant. Then the public announcement. He slid the ring across the table toward her. Try it on. Madison picked it up, the cold metal foreign against her skin. It fit perfectly. Of course it does, she thought bitterly. He's thought of everything. She looked up at Ethan, searching his face for something. Warmth, doubt, humanity. But he was unreadable, a fortress built of logic and control. She whispered, almost to herself, "This is insane." He tilted his head slightly. Probably. But we both have something to gain. Isn't that what marriage is? A transaction? Not in my world, Madison shot back before she could stop herself. Ethan's eyes flickered with something. Surprise, curiosity. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Then, welcome to mine. That night, back in her cramped studio apartment, Madison sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the ring on her finger. It caught the light from the street lamp outside, scattering rainbows across the peeling wallpaper. She thought about her mother, frail and tired, insisting she didn't need another round of treatment because they couldn't afford it. She thought about her kid brother, brilliant and hungry for a future that seemed just out of reach. And she thought about Ethan Lawson, the man who looked at marriage like a merger and at her like a solution to a PR problem. Madison whispered into the empty room. What have I gotten myself into? Outside, the city hummed, indifferent. Inside, the girl who'd just agreed to become a billionaire's fake wife tried to convince herself she was doing the right thing. But deep down, a voice whispered, "This is going to change everything. And not in the ways you expect." The wedding was nothing like Madison had imagined. Not that she'd ever really let herself imagine a wedding before. It took place in a private room at City Hall. Just her, Ethan, 2 hired witnesses who looked bored, and a judge who recited vows like he was reading a grocery list. No flowers, no music, no family. Just signatures and a photograph for the marriage license. Madison wore a simple cream dress she'd bought on sale, while Ethan stood beside her in another immaculate suit, his expression as unreadable as stone. When the judge said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan hesitated for the briefest second. Then he leaned down, his hand resting lightly on her waist, and pressed his lips to hers. It was quick, professional. And yet Madison's heart hammered so loudly she was certain everyone in the room could hear it. His lips were softer than she expected, warm, and for a fleeting moment, she forgot this was fake. Then he pulled away, and the illusion shattered. The first test came 3 days later. A charity gala at the Grand Ballroom, the kind of event where women dripped in diamonds and men exchanged business cards between glasses of scotch. Madison stood in front of the mirror in the hotel suite Ethan had arranged for her, barely recognizing herself. The stylist had transformed her, a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves, hair swept into an elegant twist, makeup that made her eyes look luminous. She looked like she belonged. But inside, she felt like an imposter. There was a knock, and Ethan entered without waiting for an answer. He stopped when he saw her, his eyes sweeping over her in a way that made her skin flush. "You look," he paused. "Perfect." Madison raised an eyebrow. That's it? Just perfect? What did you expect? Poetry? She laughed despite herself. From you? I'd settle for a complete sentence. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the ice. You'll do fine tonight. Just stay close, smile, and let me handle the conversations. What if someone asks me something I don't know? Then be honest. People find honesty refreshing. He stepped closer, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her wrist. His fingers brushed her skin, sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. Just remember, we're selling a story. Newlyweds, hopelessly in love. Madison tilted her head, her voice teasing. Hopelessly in love with a man I barely know. Sounds believable. Ethan's lips twitched, almost a smile. You'd be surprised how many real marriages start that way. The gala was overwhelming. A sea of beautiful people, clinking glasses, and scrutinizing stares. The moment they walked in, cameras flashed. Ethan's hand settled on the small of Madison's back, a possessive, protective gesture that made her pulse skip. She leaned into him, playing the part, and whispered, "How am I doing?" His breath was warm against her ear. Better than I expected. Don't trip in those heels. She bit back a laugh. Wow, so romantic. I'm swooning. Good. Keep swooning. We have an audience. And they did. Everywhere Madison looked, eyes followed them. Whispers trailed in their wake. Is that Ethan Lawson's wife? Where did she come from? She's so normal. Madison's jaw tightened, but Ethan squeezed her hand gently, grounding her. Ignore them. They're just jealous. Of what? That I married a robot? This time he did smile. A real one. Small and fleeting but genuine. Careful, Mrs. Lawson. People might think you actually like me. The name, Mrs. Lawson, sent a strange thrill through her. She pushed it down. Dangerous territory. An older woman in a glittering gold gown approached, her smile sharp as a knife. Ethan, darling, you've been hiding this lovely creature. Introduce us. Ethan's arm tightened around Madison's waist. This is my wife, Madison. Madison, this is Victoria Harrington. She owns half the art galleries in the city. Victoria's eyes glittered with curiosity. How did you two meet? Such a whirlwind romance. No one even knew Ethan was seeing anyone. Madison's mind went blank. She hadn't prepared for this. But Ethan answered smoothly. We met at a coffee shop. She spilled her drink on me. I knew immediately she was different. Madison stared at him, shocked by how easily the lie rolled off his tongue, and how convincing it sounded. Victoria laughed, delighted. How charmingly ordinary. And you, dear, what do you do? Madison forced a smile. I work in social services, helping families navigate healthcare systems. The truth, but stripped of its desperation. Victoria's smile thinned, clearly unimpressed. How noble. She drifted away, and Madison exhaled. That was brutal. Ethan guided her toward the bar. You handled it well. I panicked. He handed her a glass of champagne. Panic, quietly. That's the key. They spent the rest of the evening playing their roles. Ethan introduced her to investors, politicians, people whose names she'd only seen in headlines. And every time someone looked at her with doubt or condescension, Ethan's hand would find hers, a silent reassurance. By the time they left, Madison's feet ached, and her face hurt from smiling. In the car, she kicked off her heels and sighed. I don't know how you do this every week. Ethan loosened his tie, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. Practice, and a high tolerance for insufferable people. Madison laughed, the sound filling the quiet car. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his eyes. What? She asked. You have a nice laugh. It's real. She didn't know what to say to that. So she looked out the window, watching the city lights blur past, and tried to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. When they reached her apartment, Ethan walked her to the door, an unnecessary gesture, but one that felt strangely natural. "Thank you," Madison said quietly. "For tonight, for not letting me drown." He looked down at her, his expression softening in the dim hallway light. "You didn't need saving. You did better than most people born into that world." The compliment caught her off guard. She fumbled with her keys, hyper-aware of how close he was standing. "Good night, Mrs. Lawson." "Good night, Mr. Lawson." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Madison?" "Yes?" He hesitated, as if weighing his words. "You're not what I expected." She smiled, genuinely. "Good. I'd hate to be predictable." Ethan's lips curved into that rare, fleeting smile. Then he was gone, leaving Madison standing in her doorway, heart racing, mind spinning. She closed the door and leaned against it, whispering into the empty apartment. "This is just business. Just a role." But her reflection in the mirror, flushed cheeks, bright eyes, told a different story. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the glittering skyline, Ethan Lawson sat in the dark, thinking about a laugh that sounded real and a woman who was supposed to be nothing more than a contract, but was quickly becoming something far more dangerous. Living as Ethan Lawson's wife, even a fake one, came with perks Madison hadn't anticipated. A credit card with no limit, access to personal shoppers, invitations to events she'd only read about in magazines. But it also came with a price. Every move was scrutinized, every smile dissected. The media couldn't get enough of the mystery woman who'd captured the heart of the most elusive billionaire in the country. Madison Carter Lawson, the headlines read, from nobody to Mrs. Billionaire overnight. She tried to ignore them, but it was impossible. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from old acquaintances suddenly interested in rekindling friendships. Her mother called, confused and worried, asking if this was real, if Madison was truly happy. "I'm fine, Mom," Madison lied, forcing brightness into her voice. "He's good to me." And he was, in his own controlled, distant way. Ethan kept his promise. He never crossed boundaries, never demanded more than what the contract stipulated. But he also never let her forget that this was transactional, until the cracks started to show. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening. Madison had been at the penthouse, the sprawling space Ethan called home, going over the schedule for the next charity event. She'd expected him to be cold and businesslike as usual, but when he walked in, soaked from the rain, his tie askew and exhaustion etched into every line of his face, something was different. "Bad day," Madison ventured, setting down her tablet. Ethan poured himself a drink, bourbon, neat, and downed it in one go. You could say that. A merger fell through. "My CFO quit, and the press is running a story claiming our marriage is a sham." Madison's stomach dropped. "What?" He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Apparently someone leaked information. "They're questioning why we live separately, why there are no photos of us being affectionate outside of staged events." His eyes met hers, sharp and accusing. Any idea who might have talked? Her chest tightened. "You think I did this? I think someone did. And you're the only variable that changed in my life." Anger flared, hot and defensive. "I signed a contract, Ethan. I've kept up my end. Maybe you should look at the people who've been in your life longer than 3 weeks. He stared at her, jaw tight, then set the glass down hard enough to make her flinch. "You're right. I'm sorry." The apology surprised her. She'd expected him to double down, to stay cold. But instead, he sank onto the couch, head in his hands. "I'm not used to this, to trusting someone." He trailed off. Madison sat down beside him, maintaining a careful distance. To what? To letting someone in, even if it's fake? Ethan looked at her, and for the first time, she saw past the armor. Saw the exhaustion, the loneliness, especially because it's fake. At least when it's real, the risk feels worth it. Her heart twisted. She wanted to reach out, to touch his shoulder, to offer comfort. But she didn't, because crossing that line felt dangerous. Instead, she said softly, "We'll fix this. We'll do more public appearances, post pictures, make it look real. Whatever it takes." He studied her, his gaze intense. "Why? Why do you care?" "Because," Madison hesitated, searching for the truth that didn't betray her. "Because I don't want you to fail. You gave me a chance when no one else would. The least I can do is make sure this works." Something shifted in the air between them, a fragile understanding, a tentative trust. Ethan's voice was quieter now. "Thank you." The rain drummed against the windows. The city lights blurred beyond the glass, and for a moment they sat in silence, two people bound by a contract, but tethered by something neither was ready to name. The next morning, Ethan's publicist called with a plan. A weekend getaway, just the two of them, to a private estate upstate. Photos of domestic bliss, candid moments, the works. "We need to sell the romance," the publicist said briskly. "The public wants to see you two in love." Madison agreed, though the idea of spending an entire weekend alone with Ethan made her nervous in ways she didn't want to examine. The estate was breathtaking, rolling hills, a lake that shimmered under the afternoon sun, a sprawling house that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. A photographer discreetly followed them, capturing moments as they walked hand in hand along the water, as Ethan draped his jacket over her shoulders when the breeze picked up, as they sat on the porch swing, her head resting on his shoulder. It should have felt fake, performative, but somewhere between the staged smiles and scripted touches, something real crept in. That evening, after the photographer left, they sat by the fireplace, sharing a bottle of wine. Ethan had shed his usual formality, rolled up sleeves, tousled hair, an ease she'd never seen before. "Tell me something true," Madison said, emboldened by the wine and the warmth. "Something not in the contract." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Like why you really needed this marriage? The board, the reputation, I get it. But there's more, isn't there?" He was quiet for a long time. "Then, my father built this empire, and when he died, everyone expected me to fail, to crumble under the weight. I've spent the last decade proving them wrong, but no matter how successful I am, there's always whispers. He's too focused, too cold. He'll never be whole because he doesn't have a family." Madison's chest ached. "So you bought one, to shut them up." His gaze met hers, raw and unguarded. "To prove I didn't need one, that I could function without." He stopped. "Without love?" He nodded slowly. "But the irony is, the more I tried to prove I didn't need it, the lonelier I became." Madison set down her glass, her voice barely a whisper. "You're not alone now." "I know," Ethan said, his eyes searching hers. "And that scares me." "Why?" "Because this isn't supposed to be real, but it's starting to feel like it is." The words hung in the air, a confession and a warning. Madison's heart pounded. She should pull back, remind him of the contract, of the boundaries. But instead, she leaned closer. Maybe that's not the worst thing. Ethan's hand reached up, fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, tentative. "Madison, if we cross this line, there's no going back." She met his gaze, steady despite the chaos in her chest. "Then maybe we don't go back." He kissed her. Not the quick, performative kiss from their wedding, but slow, deep, real. His hand cupped her face, and she melted into him, all the walls she'd built crumbling in an instant. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates everything." Madison smiled, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Good." I was getting bored with Simple. They spent the rest of the night talking, laughing, sharing stories they'd never told anyone. And when Madison finally fell asleep, curled up beside him on the couch, Ethan watched her, a feeling he couldn't name tightening his chest. For the first time in years, the fortress he'd built around his heart had a crack, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to seal it or let it break wide open. The weeks following their weekend away blurred into something Madison couldn't quite define. They were still playing roles in public, the devoted newlyweds, but in private, the lines had become dangerously tangled. Ethan started calling her just to talk, about his day, about a frustrating meeting, about nothing at all. Madison found herself looking forward to those calls more than she cared to admit. He'd show up at her apartment unannounced with takeout, claiming he didn't want to eat, alone. They'd sit on her threadbare couch, laughing at bad movies, and for a few hours, the contract didn't exist. It was terrifying and intoxicating. One evening, as they sat side by side, cartons of Chinese food spread across her coffee table, Ethan glanced around her small apartment. "You know, you don't have to live here anymore. The penthouse has more than enough space." Madison raised an eyebrow. "So, we'd be roommates?" He shrugged, a playful glint in his eyes. "Roommates who happen to be married?" She laughed. "That's the weirdest pitch I've ever heard." His expression softened. I like having you around." The admission made her chest tighten. "Me too. But moving in, that feels like what? Like it's getting too real?" Madison nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Ethan set down his chopsticks and turned to face her fully. "Maybe it already is." She looked up, her breath catching. He was close, so close she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. "What are we doing, Ethan?" "I don't know," he admitted, his voice rough. "But I don't want to stop. Neither do I." He kissed her then, slow and deliberate, and Madison let herself fall. The contract, the money, the pretense, it all faded. In that moment, there was only him. Only this. But reality had a cruel way of intruding. The next morning, Madison's phone rang. It was her brother, calling from the hospital. Mom collapsed. "You need to come. Now." Madison's world tilted. She grabbed her bag, hands shaking, and rushed out. Ethan found her in the hospital waiting room hours later, her face pale, eyes red from crying. The doctor had said it was exhaustion, stress, that her mother needed rest and better medication. All things that required money. Money Madison had, because of the contract. Ethan sat beside her, silent, his hand finding hers. "I can help. Pay for whatever she needs." Madison shook her head. "You've already done so much. This isn't part of the deal." He frowned. "Forget the deal. Let me help." "Because she's your responsibility?" "No, because I care about you." The words hit her like a wave. She looked at him, searching for a lie, for the cold calculation she'd expected when they first met. But all she saw was sincerity. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care?" Ethan's thumb brushed over her knuckles. "Because somewhere between the fake smiles and staged photos, you became real to me." Madison didn't have words, so she leaned into him, letting his warmth steady her. And for the first time since this started, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just about a contract anymore. Ethan covered all of her mother's medical expenses, upgrading her to a private room with the best doctors. Madison tried to protest, but he'd already made the calls. "It's done," he said simply. "Let me do this." Her mother, frail but sharp as ever, eyed Ethan with suspicion when he visited. "So, you're the billionaire who married my daughter out of nowhere?" Ethan, unfazed, nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "And why exactly did you do that?" Madison tensed, but Ethan's answer was steady. "Because she's extraordinary, and I wanted her in my life." Her mother's expression softened, just slightly. She looked at Madison, then back at Ethan. "You hurt her, and I don't care how much money you have. I'll make your life miserable." Ethan's lips twitched into a smile. Understood. Later, as they walked through the hospital parking lot, Madison bumped her shoulder against his. "You handled my mom better than most CEOs handle board meetings. She's terrifying. But I respect that." Madison laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "Thank you. For everything." He stopped, turning to face her. "You don't have to keep thanking me. I want to be here." "Do you? Or is this still part of the performance?" Ethan cupped her face, his gaze intense. "Madison, I stopped performing weeks ago." Her heart stuttered. She rose on her toes and kissed him, right there in the parking lot, under the flickering streetlights. And for the first time, it felt like the beginning of something real. But back at the penthouse that night, as Madison scrolled through her phone, an email caught her eye. From the lawyer who'd drafted the contract, a reminder that they were approaching the 6-month mark, halfway through the year, halfway to the end. Madison's stomach twisted. She glanced at Ethan, who was reading on the couch, oblivious. What happens when the year is up, she thought. What happens if this ends and I've already fallen? She closed her eyes, pushing the thought away. Not yet. She wasn't ready to face that reality. Not when this, whatever it was, felt too good to lose. The 6-month mark came and went without acknowledgement from either of them. It was as if they'd made an unspoken pact not to mention it, not to think about the contract's expiration looming on the horizon. Madison had moved into the penthouse, though she kept insisting it was temporary, just until her mom fully recovered. Ethan didn't argue. He liked having her there, liked waking up to the smell of coffee she'd already brewed, liked the sound of her laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent for too long. But the media wasn't so easily placated. Rumors swirled constantly. Some outlets praised their romance, others speculated it was all for show. And then there was the investigative piece, a journalist digging into Madison's background, questioning her motives. "Gold digger," the headline screamed. Did Madison Carter marry for love or money? Madison stared at her phone, the words blurring as tears pricked her eyes. She'd known this might happen, but seeing it in print felt like a punch to the gut. Ethan found her on the terrace, arms wrapped around herself against the evening chill. He didn't say anything, just draped his jacket over her shoulders and stood beside her. "I knew people would talk," Madison said quietly, "but it still hurts." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You know the truth. I know the truth. That's all that matters." "Is it?" She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "Because sometimes I wonder if they're right, if I did this for the money. And maybe at first I did. But now," Ethan's jaw tightened. "But now? Now I don't know where the act ends and the truth begins." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "The truth is, you're the best thing that's happened to me in years. The truth is, I don't want this to end." Madison's breath hitched. "Even after the year is up? Especially after the year is up." She pulled back just enough to see his face. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying, forget the contract." His voice was firm, resolute. "Stay because you want to, not because of money or obligation. Stay because this, us, is real." Madison's heart soared and shattered all at once, because it was real, terrifyingly, beautifully real, and that made everything so much more complicated. But before she could answer, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. "What is it?" "There's a board meeting tomorrow. Emergency session. They're questioning my judgment, calling the marriage a distraction." Madison's stomach sank. "Because of me," he shook his head. "Because they're vultures looking for any excuse to undermine me. I'll handle it. Let me come with you." Ethan frowned. "It'll be brutal. I don't care. We're in this together, right?" A slow smile spread across his face. Together. The boardroom was as cold and imposing as Madison had imagined. 12 men and women in tailored suits sat around a gleaming table, their expressions ranging from skeptical to outright hostile. Ethan sat at the head, Madison beside him, her chin held high despite the nerves clawing at her insides. "Mr. Lawson," one of the board members began, a silver-haired man with a voice like gravel. "This marriage of yours has become a liability. The press is questioning its legitimacy, and by extension questioning your judgment." Ethan's expression was ice. "My personal life is not up for debate. When it affects the company's stock and reputation, it is," a woman across the table interjected. "We need assurance that this isn't some publicity stunt that will blow up in our faces." Madison felt the weight of their stares. She wanted to shrink, to disappear. But then Ethan's hand found hers under the table, a silent anchor. He spoke, his voice steady and commanding. "Madison is my wife, not a publicity stunt, not a distraction. She's the reason I've been more focused, more driven than ever. And if you can't see that, then perhaps it's your judgment that should be questioned." The room fell silent. Madison squeezed his hand, a surge of pride and love, yes, love, flooding through her. The silver-haired man leaned back, studying them. "Prove it. Prove this marriage is legitimate, and we'll drop the matter." "How?" Ethan's tone was sharp. "A vow renewal, public, extravagant. Show the world, and us, that this is real." Madison's heart raced. A vow renewal, another performance, or a chance to make it real. She looked at Ethan, saw the conflict in his eyes. He turned to her, his voice low. "It's your choice. We don't have to do this." Madison thought about the contract, about the money, about all the reasons this had started. And then she thought about the laughter, the late-night talks, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. She met his gaze, her voice steady. "Let's do it. Not for them. For us." Ethan's eyes softened, and he nodded. The board members murmured among themselves. Then the silver-haired man spoke. "Very well. You have 2 months. Make it convincing." As they left the boardroom, Madison exhaled shakily. "Did we just agree to get married again?" Ethan pulled her into an empty hallway, his hands framing her face. "Only this time it won't be fake." Her breath caught. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "Madison, I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I fell for you. Really, truly fell. And if we're doing this vow renewal, I want it to mean something." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "It already means something." He kissed her, deep and slow, and Madison felt the last of her doubts dissolve. The contract didn't matter anymore. The money didn't matter. All that mattered was this, them and the fragile, beautiful thing they'd built from a lie. That night, as they lay tangled together in the dim light of the penthouse, Madison whispered, "What if we mess this up?" Ethan's arms tightened around her. "Then we'll mess it up together." She laughed softly, her heart full. "I can live with that." Outside, the city glittered, indifferent. But inside, 2 people who'd started as strangers bound by a contract had found something neither had been looking for. Something real, and they weren't letting go. Planning a vow renewal should have been simple, especially with an unlimited budget and a team of professionals at their disposal. But nothing about Madison and Ethan's relationship had ever been simple. The wedding planner, a sharp woman named Claire with an eye for detail and zero tolerance for nonsense, sat across from them in the penthouse, tablet in hand. So, what's the vision? Romantic? Modern? Classic? Madison glanced at Ethan, who looked as uncomfortable as she felt. I don't know. What do people usually do? Claire's eyebrow arched. Usually, they have an idea of what they want. You two act like you've never planned a wedding before. We haven't, Madison blurted. Not really. The first one was rushed. Claire's expression didn't change, but Madison could feel the judgment. Right. Well, let's start with basics. Venue? Ethan shrugged. Something outdoors. Madison likes nature. Madison blinked. I do? You spent 20 minutes staring at the lake last time we were upstate. You looked happy. Her chest warmed. Okay. Outdoors. Claire nodded, making notes. Guest list. Ethan frowned. Small. Just close friends and family. Madison bit her lip. I don't really have a lot of. Ethan's hand covered hers. Then, we'll keep it intimate. The people who matter. Claire looked between them, her expression softening slightly. You two are either the most genuine couple I've ever worked with, or the best actors. Madison and Ethan exchanged a glance, and despite everything, they both smiled. Maybe a little of both, Madison admitted. Over the next few weeks, the vow renewal preparations consumed them. Madison found herself caught up in the whirlwind, choosing flowers, tasting cakes, debating color palettes. It felt surreal, like playing house, except this time, the stakes were real. One afternoon, while trying on dresses at an exclusive boutique, Madison stood in front of the mirror, draped in ivory silk, and felt her throat tighten. Her mother sat nearby, watching with misty eyes. You look beautiful, sweetheart. Madison's reflection stared back at her, a stranger in a fairy tale gown. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. How do you know if love is real? Or if you're just convincing yourself it is? Her mother was quiet for a moment. Love isn't something you know. It's something you feel. In the way someone looks at you. The way they show up when things are hard. Does Ethan do that? Madison thought about the hospital visits, the quiet support, the way he'd held her hand in the boardroom. Yes. Then it's real. Tears slipped down Madison's cheeks. What if I mess it up? Her mother stood, walking over to cup Madison's face. Then you mess it up. But at least you'll have tried. That's more than most people can say. Madison nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Thank you, Mom. Meanwhile, Ethan was having his own crisis. His best friend, Marcus, cornered him at the office. You're really doing this? The vow renewal? Ethan didn't look up from his computer. Yes. Marcus leaned against the desk. You fell for her. It wasn't a question. Ethan's fingers stilled on the keyboard. He finally looked up. Completely. Marcus whistled low. Man, when you commit, you really commit. What if she doesn't feel the same? She does. How do you know? Because she stayed, even when she didn't have to. Marcus grinned. You're in deep, Lawson. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. Yeah, I am. The night before the vow renewal, Madison couldn't sleep. She wandered out to the terrace, the city sprawling below her, a sea of lights and possibilities. Ethan found her there, 2 glasses of wine in hand. Couldn't sleep either. She shook her head, accepting the glass. Nervous? Terrified, she admitted. What if tomorrow feels like a performance? What if we're just good at pretending? Ethan set down his glass and took her hands. Madison, look at me. She did. her heart pounding. I'm not pretending anymore. I haven't been for a long time. Every moment with you, every laugh, every conversation, it's real. You're real. And tomorrow isn't about convincing anyone else. It's about us. Tears blurred her vision. I love you. I don't know when it happened, but I do. I love you. He pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. I love you too. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the city humming below, and for the first time, Madison felt truly at peace. The vow renewal took place at a private estate overlooking the ocean. White flowers adorned every surface, the scent of roses and sea salt mingling in the air. A small group of guests, Madison's family, Ethan's close friends, people who mattered, sat in elegant chairs facing the altar. Madison walked down the aisle, her hand in her brother's, her mother watching with tears streaming down her face. But all Madison could see was Ethan, standing at the altar, his eyes locked on hers. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're breathtaking." She smiled through her tears. "You're not so bad yourself," the officiant began, but Madison barely heard the words. All she could focus on was Ethan, the way he held her hands like she was something precious, the way his voice shook slightly when he recited his vows. "Madison Carter, when I met you, I thought I had everything figured out. I thought love was a weakness, a distraction. But you showed me it's the strongest thing there is. You've made me better, braver. And I vow, for the rest of my life, to be the man you deserve." Madison's tears flowed freely. "Ethan Lawson, I walked into this not knowing what to expect. I thought it was just a deal, a transaction. But you gave me so much more. You gave me hope, trust, love. And I vow to stand by you, through every challenge, every triumph, for as long as you'll have me. I now pronounce you," the officiant paused, "still husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Ethan pulled her in, and the kiss was everything. Tender, passionate, real. The small crowd erupted in applause, but Madison and Ethan were lost in their own world. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan whispered, "No more pretending." "No more pretending," Madison agreed. The reception was intimate, filled with laughter and music. Madison danced with her brother, her mother, and finally with Ethan. As they swayed under the stars, he murmured, "Thank you." "For what?" "For taking a chance on me." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Best decision I ever made." And as the night stretched on, surrounded by love and light, Madison realized something. The contract, the money, the deal. It had all led her here. To a love she never expected. A love that was entirely, beautifully real. The months following the vow renewal felt like a dream Madison was afraid to wake from. She and Ethan settled into a rhythm, one that didn't require contracts or pretense. They laughed over breakfast, argued about which Netflix series to binge, and navigated the complexities of merging two very different worlds. But reality, as always, had other plans. It started with a phone call. Madison was at a coffee shop, working on a proposal for a nonprofit initiative she wanted to launch, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Hello? Is this Madison Lawson?" The voice was female, crisp, and professional. "Yes." "Who is this?" "My name is Rachel Torres. I'm a journalist with the National Herald. I'm working on a story about your husband, and I thought you might want to comment." Madison's stomach dropped. "A story? About what?" "About the origins of your marriage. I have sources claiming it was a business arrangement, a contract, that you were paid to marry Ethan Lawson." The words hit like a slap. Madison's hands trembled. That's not." Rachel's tone softened, almost sympathetic. "Look, I'm going to publish either way. but I wanted to give you a chance to tell your side." Madison hung up, her heart hammering. She stared at her phone, mind racing. Someone had leaked the contract. Someone knew. She called Ethan immediately. "We have a problem." He listened, his silence heavy and ominous. When she finished, he said quietly, "Come home. We'll handle this together." The penthouse felt suffocating when she arrived. Ethan was already on the phone with his legal team, his expression grim. When he hung up, he looked at her, and Madison saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. "They're going to publish tomorrow," he said, "unless we give them a reason not to." "How?" "We could deny it, but if they have proof," his jaw tightened. "It'll look like we're lying." Madison sank onto the couch, her mind spinning. "So what do we do? Tell the truth." Madison's head snapped up. "What?" Ethan sat beside her, taking her hands. "We go public. We admit the marriage started as a contract, but we also tell them it became real, that we fell in love." "Are you insane?" Madison's voice rose. "That'll destroy your reputation. The board will. The board can go to hell." His eyes blazed. "I'm not losing you because of some scandal. We've faced worse. But this is different. This is the truth, Madison, and I'm tired of hiding it." She stared at him, torn between terror and hope. What if they don't believe us? Then they don't. But at least we'll have been honest. Madison took a shaky breath. "Okay, let's do it." The press conference was scheduled for the following afternoon. Madison stood backstage, her hands clammy, her heart racing. Ethan squeezed her hand. "We don't have to do this. We could fight it in court, tie them up in legal battles." She shook her head. "No, I'm tired of hiding too." They walked out together, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. Ethan stepped up to the microphone, his voice steady. "I'm here to address the rumors about my marriage. It's true that Madison and I entered into a contractual arrangement. I needed a wife for professional reasons, and she needed financial support for her family." The room erupted in murmurs. Ethan continued, "But what started as a transaction became something neither of us expected. We fell in love, and everything we've shared since has been real." Madison stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. "I won't lie and say I didn't marry Ethan for the money. I did. My mother was sick. My family was drowning in debt, and he offered a lifeline. But over time, I saw the man behind the headlines. Someone kind, generous, and far more human than anyone gives him credit for." She looked at Ethan, her eyes glistening. "I love him, not because of his wealth or status, but because of who he is." The room was silent. Then, slowly, one reporter raised a hand. "How do we know this isn't just damage control?" Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. "You don't. You'll have to decide for yourselves. But I can tell you this. I'd rather lose my company, my reputation, everything, than lose her." Madison's breath caught. The press conference ended, and the fallout was immediate. Some outlets praised their honesty, calling it a modern love story. Others condemned them, labeling it a scandal. The board called another emergency meeting. This time, Ethan walked in alone. "I'm resigning," he said simply. The room froze. "Ethan," the silver-haired man began, "let's not be hasty." "I'm not being hasty. I'm being clear. This company has consumed my life for too long, and I'm choosing something more important." "Madison." The board members exchanged glances. One woman spoke up. "And if we refuse your resignation, then I'll fight you every step of the way. But I'm done letting this company dictate my personal life." There was a long pause. Then the silver-haired man sighed. "You're a fool, Lawson." Ethan smiled. "Maybe. But I'm a fool in love." When he returned to the penthouse, Madison was pacing. "What happened?" "I quit." Her eyes widened. You what? I chose you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She threw her arms around him, half laughing, half crying. You're insane. Completely. Good, he murmured, holding her tight. I'd hate to be boring. That night, they lay tangled together, the future uncertain but theirs to shape. Madison whispered, "What now?" Ethan kissed her forehead. "Now we live. Really live." And they did. Ethan started a new venture, something smaller, more personal. Madison launched her nonprofit. They traveled, laughed, fought, and loved fiercely. The contract that had brought them together was long forgotten, replaced by something far more binding. A love they chose, every single day. 3 months after Ethan's resignation, life had taken on a quieter, sweeter rhythm. They'd left the penthouse and moved to a brownstone in Brooklyn, a place with creaky floors and a garden Madison insisted on filling with wildflowers. Ethan, who'd never touched a shovel in his life, found himself spending Saturday mornings helping her plant roses. Who knew the great Ethan Lawson had a green thumb? Madison teased, dirt smudged on her cheek. I don't. I just like watching you smile. She threw a handful of soil at him, laughing when he dodged. You're such a sap. He pulled her close, despite her protests about being filthy. A sap who loves you. Fine. You win. But his new venture, a sustainable tech startup, was thriving. Freed from the corporate constraints of the Blackwood Empire, Ethan poured his passion into projects that actually mattered. And Madison's nonprofit, which provided healthcare navigation for low-income families, had just secured a major grant. Everything should have been perfect. But Madison couldn't shake the lingering anxiety. The contract still existed, locked away in a drawer. Technically, they were still bound by it for another 2 months. And then what? They'd never officially dissolved it, never addressed what happened when the year ended. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Ethan reading reports and Madison scrolling through emails, she finally spoke. Ethan? The contract ends in 8 weeks. He looked up, his expression unreadable. I know. What happens then? He set down his papers and turned to face her fully. What do you want to happen? Madison's heart raced. I don't know. I mean, we're married for real now, right? But technically, right now, you're still contractually obligated to be my wife, Ethan said slowly. And when that ends, you're free to leave, if you want. Do you want me to leave? God, no. Then why does it feel like there's a clock ticking? Because there is. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Madison, I never wanted you to feel trapped. The contract was supposed to give you freedom financially. But now, he hesitated. Now I need to know you're staying because you want to. Not because of some legal agreement. Madison's throat tightened. You think I'd leave? I don't know. You married me for money once. What if I do it again? Her voice was sharper than she intended. Ethan, I fell in love with you. That contract stopped mattering months ago. Then let's end it. Now. Tonight. Madison blinked. What? He stood, pulling her up with him. Let's burn the damn thing. Officially end the contract. And then, if you want, we can start over. Get married again, for real this time. No terms, no conditions. Just us. Her eyes filled with tears. You want to marry me again? I want to marry you every day for the rest of my life. But only if that's what you want. Madison laughed through her tears. Yes. Yes, you idiot. I want that too. He kissed her, deep and fierce, and when they finally pulled apart, he led her to the study. He opened the drawer, pulled out the contract, thick and official, and handed it to her. Together? Together? They tore it in half, then in quarters, then kept ripping until it was nothing but confetti scattered across the floor. Madison felt a weight lift from her chest. It's really over. The contract, yes. Ethan pulled her close. But we're just beginning. That night, as they lay in bed, Madison whispered, "Do you ever regret it? The contract? The board? Leaving everything behind?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The only thing I regret is not finding you sooner." She smiled, her heart full. "I love you. I love you too." And as sleep pulled her under, Madison realized something. She'd spent so long afraid of the contract ending, afraid of losing what they'd built. But now she understood. What they had wasn't fragile. It wasn't dependent on signatures or clauses. It was built on choice, on showing up, on loving each other even when it was messy and complicated. And that was stronger than any contract could ever be. The next morning, Ethan woke her with coffee and a mischievous grin. "What?" Madison asked, suspicious. "I have an idea." "Oh, no. Hear me out. What if we elope? Again? We've already had 2 weddings. 3rd time's the charm. Just you, me, and a justice of the peace. No press, no board, no pressure. Just us." Madison considered, then grinned. "Where? Vegas? Too cliché. Paris? Too expensive. Wait, you're a billionaire." "Was a billionaire. Now I'm a moderately wealthy entrepreneur." Madison laughed. "Fine. Courthouse. Next week. Deal." And they did. 1 week later, they stood in a small courthouse, no fanfare, no guests. Just a judge, 2 witnesses pulled from the hallway, and the 2 of them. When the judge pronounced them married again, Ethan dipped Madison into a kiss that made the witnesses cheer. Afterward, they walked through the city, hand in hand, and grabbed hot dogs from a street vendor. "Mrs. Lawson," Ethan said, taking a bite, "what do you want to do now?" Madison grinned. Everything. They spent the day wandering, visiting a bookstore, catching a matinee, sitting in the park, and people watching. No agenda, no cameras, just 2 people in love. Living. That night, back at the brownstone, Madison curled up against Ethan. "Thank you." "For what?" "For choosing me, every single day." He kissed the top of her head. "Always." And in that moment, Madison knew. This was it. The life she'd never dared to dream of. And it was more beautiful than any contract could have ever promised. 6 months into their new life, Madison and Ethan had found a balance that felt right. His startup was expanding. Her nonprofit had helped over 500 families. And they'd even adopted a dog, a scruffy rescue named Biscuit, who had a talent for stealing socks. But the peace was disrupted one autumn evening when Madison received a letter. Not an email, but an actual letter. Cream-colored paper. Expensive. She opened it at the kitchen table while Ethan cooked dinner, and her blood ran cold. It was from Victoria Harrington, the woman from the gala, the one who'd looked at Madison like she was a curiosity. The letter was an invitation, or rather, a summons. "Dear Madison, I'm hosting a charity auction and would be honored if you and Ethan would attend. It's for a cause I know you'll appreciate, children's health care. I do hope you'll come. It would be such a shame if people thought you were hiding." The last line felt like a threat. Madison's hands trembled as she set the letter down. Ethan glanced over. "What is it?" She slid the letter across the table. He read it, his jaw tightening. "We don't have to go." "I know. But if we don't, it looks like we're running. And I'm tired of running." Ethan studied her. "You sure?" Madison nodded. "Besides, it's for a good cause. And I want to show them we're not ashamed." His lips curved into a proud smile. "That's my girl." The night of the auction, Madison wore a deep emerald gown that Ethan had insisted on buying. "You look like a queen," he murmured, fastening a diamond necklace around her throat. "I feel like I'm going into battle. You are. But you'll win." The venue was a sprawling estate, chandeliers dripping crystal, guests dripping wealth. Madison felt the familiar prickle of being watched, judged, but this time she held her head high. Ethan's hand at her back was a constant reassurance. Victoria greeted them at the entrance, all smiles and sharp eyes. "Madison, darling, so glad you could make it." And Ethan, looking as dashing as ever. Madison forced a polite smile. "Thank you for the invitation." "Of course. After all, you're one of us now, aren't you?" The implication was clear. Madison wasn't one of them, and never would be. But instead of shrinking, Madison met Victoria's gaze evenly. "I'm not sure I'd want to be, but I'm happy to support the cause." Victoria's smile thinned. How admirable. The auction itself was extravagant. Art, jewelry, even a week-long stay at a private island. Madison watched, fascinated and repulsed by the casual way people threw around money. When a children's hospital wing was up for bid, Ethan raised his paddle. 500,000. The room murmured. Another bidder countered. 600,000. Ethan didn't hesitate. 1 million. Madison's eyes widened. "Ethan, 1 million going once," the auctioneer called. "Twice." Sold to Mr. Lawson. Applause rippled through the room. Madison leaned close. "That was necessary," Ethan said simply. "They need it." Her heart swelled. Later, as they mingled, a man approached. Someone Madison didn't recognize. "Mr. Lawson, I'm Daniel Cross. I run a venture capital firm. I wanted to say, I respect what you've done. Walking away from Blackwood, starting fresh. It takes guts." Ethan shook his hand. "Thank you." "And Mrs. Lawson," Daniel turned to Madison. "Your nonprofit is doing incredible work. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership." Madison blinked, stunned. I'd love that." As Daniel walked away, Madison turned to Ethan, beaming. "Did that just happen?" "Told you. You're winning." But the night wasn't over. As they prepared to leave, Victoria cornered them one last time. "You've certainly made an impression." Madison smiled sweetly. "We try." Victoria's eyes glittered. "Just remember, darling, this world can be unforgiving. One misstep, and what?" Ethan's voice was cold. Victoria's smile faltered. "Just friendly advice." Madison stepped closer, her voice low and steady. "I appreciate the concern. But we didn't come this far by being careful. We came this far by being real. And that's something no amount of money can buy." Victoria's expression flickered. Surprise. Maybe even respect. She inclined her head. "Touché." In the car ride home, Madison exhaled shakily. That was terrifying. Ethan laced his fingers through hers. "You were magnificent." I wanted to punch her. He laughed, a rich, warm sound. "Next time I'll hold your purse." Madison giggled, the tension dissolving. When they got home, Biscuit greeted them with enthusiastic barking. Ethan scooped up the dog, while Madison kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. "You know," Ethan said, watching her, "I don't think I've ever been prouder of anyone." Madison looked up, her heart full. Yeah. You faced down the wolves and didn't flinch." She crossed the room and kissed him. "I had a good partner. Always." That night, as they lay in bed, Biscuit sprawled between them, Madison thought about how far they'd come. From a sterile contract to this, a life full of love, challenges, and a scruffy dog who snored. "Ethan." "Thank you for not giving up on me. On us." He turned, his eyes soft in the dim light. "I could never give up on you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." She smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "Ditto." And as sleep pulled her under, Madison knew, without a doubt, that this was home. Not the brownstone, not the wealth or status. This, him, them. And that was more than enough. A year and a half after the original contract was signed, Madison stood in front of a crowd of 200 people at a conference center, her hands only slightly trembling as she gripped the microphone. She was keynoting a healthcare symposium, sharing her nonprofit's success story. Ethan sat in the front row, his eyes never leaving her. "When I started this journey," Madison said, her voice steady, "I didn't know if I could make a difference. I was just a girl who'd seen her family struggle and wanted to help others avoid the same pain. But what I've learned is that we all have the power to create change, no matter where we start." The audience applauded, and Madison felt a surge of pride. After her speech, people swarmed her, asking questions, sharing their own stories. Ethan waited patiently, and when the crowd finally thinned, he approached with a bouquet of sunflowers. "You were incredible," he said, kissing her cheek. "I almost cried." "You did cry." "I saw you," he grinned. "Okay, maybe a little." On the drive home, Madison's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "So proud of you, sweetheart. Your father would be too." Madison's throat tightened. Her father had passed away when she was 12, but she still felt his absence keenly. She showed Ethan the message. He squeezed her hand. He would be. "You've built something amazing." That night, they celebrated with takeout and wine on the rooftop garden of their brownstone. The city stretched out below them, a glittering expanse of possibility. "Ethan," Madison said, tracing the rim of her glass, "do you ever think about what life would be like if we'd never met?" "All the time." And I hate every version of it." She laughed. "Me too." He set down his glass and turned to her, his expression serious. "Madison, there's something I want to ask you." Her heart skipped. "Okay. I know we've already gotten married twice, technically 3 times if you count the vow renewal. But," he pulled out a small box, and Madison's breath caught. Ethan opened it, revealing a simple gold band etched with delicate vines. "I want to give you this, not as part of a contract or a performance, but as a promise that I'll love you, choose you, every single day, for the rest of my life." Tears streamed down her face. "Ethan, we've been through so much, and I want you to know that you're it for me. Forever." Madison took the ring, her hand shaking, and slid it onto her finger beside her wedding band. And then she pulled out a small box of her own. Ethan blinked. "What?" "I had the same idea," she said, laughing through her tears. She opened the box, revealing a matching gold band for him. "Great minds," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. She slid the ring onto his finger, and they sat there, holding each other as the city hummed below. "I love you," Madison whispered. "I love you too." Months later, Madison discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the test, her heart pounding, a mix of joy and terror swirling in her chest. When she told Ethan, he went very still. "Say something," she urged. He looked up, eyes glistening. "We're having a baby." Madison nodded. A slow, brilliant smile spread across his face. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around. "We're having a baby." They laughed and cried, and that night they lay in bed, Ethan's hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I'm scared," Madison admitted. "Me too. But we'll figure it out. Together. Together." The pregnancy was both beautiful and exhausting. Madison experienced every symptom imaginable, and Ethan hovered like an anxious helicopter. When she craved pickles and ice cream at 2 a.m., he drove across the city to find them. When she cried over a commercial about puppies, he held her and didn't ask questions. One evening, as they assembled a crib in the nursery, Madison paused. "What if I'm a terrible mother?" Ethan looked up from the instruction manual, which he'd been glaring at for 20 minutes. "You won't be." "How do you know?" "Because you care enough to worry. That's half the battle." She smiled, her anxiety easing slightly. "What about you?" What if I'm a terrible dad? Then our kid will have great material for therapy. Madison laughed, throwing a crib part at him. The baby, a girl they named Lily, arrived on a rainy April morning. Madison had never experienced pain like labor, but the moment they placed Lily in her arms, everything else faded. Ethan stood beside her, tears streaming down his face as he gazed at their daughter. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's ours," Madison corrected, her voice full of wonder. That first year was chaos, sleepless nights, endless diapers, moments of doubt. But it was also filled with a love so fierce it took Madison's breath away. Watching Ethan cradle Lily, singing off-key lullabies, she fell in love with him all over again. One night, as Lily finally slept, Madison and Ethan collapsed on the couch. "I can't remember what sleep feels like," Madison groaned. Ethan pulled her close. "Worth it, though. Completely." They sat in comfortable silence, and Madison thought about the contract that had started it all. How a desperate decision had led to this, a family, a life, a love she couldn't have imagined. "Ethan? Yeah, thank you. For everything, for taking a chance on me." He kissed her temple. "Best investment I ever made." She laughed softly. "I love you. Love you too, Mrs. Lawson. Always." And as the city lights twinkled outside and their daughter slept peacefully down the hall, Madison knew this was it. The happily ever after. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real, messy, beautiful, and entirely theirs. 5 years later, Lily was a whirlwind of energy, all wild curls and endless questions. Ethan's startup had gone public, and Madison's nonprofit had expanded to 12 cities. They'd bought a house in the suburbs, complete with a backyard where Biscuit, now graying around the muzzle, liked to nap in the sun. Life had settled into a beautiful, chaotic rhythm. But Madison couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, she found Ethan in his study, reviewing reports. He looked up when she entered, smiling. "Hey, you! Hey!" She sat on the edge of his desk. "Can we talk?" "Always. What's on your mind?" Madison hesitated. "I've been thinking. About the contract." Ethan's expression shifted, guarded. "Okay. Not in a bad way," she clarified quickly. "Just, I was remembering how scared I was back then, how desperate. And now," she looked around, "now we have all this. And I keep thinking about other people in that same position, people who need a lifeline." Ethan leaned back, intrigued. "What are you thinking? What if we created a fund? For people in crisis, medical bills, education, housing, no strings, no contracts, just help." A slow smile spread across Ethan's face. "You want to give people what you needed? Exactly. We can afford it. And I want to give back." Ethan stood, pulling her into his arms. "I love you. So much. You know that?" She grinned. "I had a feeling. Let's do it." "Really?" "Really. Let's call it the Carter Lawson Foundation." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "You'd put my name first? It was your idea. And," he kissed her forehead, "you're the heart of this family." Within a year, the Carter Lawson Foundation had helped over 1,000 families. Madison poured herself into the work, and Ethan supported her every step of the way. They attended events together, shared their story, and inspired others to give. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraiser, they stood on the balcony of their hotel room, overlooking the city. "Remember when we first met?" Madison asked, leaning against the railing. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "How could I forget? You looked terrified." "I was terrified. You were this intimidating billionaire, and I was just the woman who changed my life." She turned in his arms, her eyes searching his. "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" "Never. Not a single moment. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts." They made us who we are." Madison kissed him, slow and deep, and when they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I don't know what I did to deserve you. You took a chance. You trusted me, even when you had every reason not to." "I'd do it again," she whispered, in a heartbeat. "Me too." They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the city lights glittered below. Two people who'd started as strangers, bound by a contract, and built a love that had withstood every test. Years later, when Lily was a teenager, she found the torn pieces of the original contract in a box in the attic. "Mom? Dad? What's this?" Madison and Ethan exchanged a glance. "Sit down, sweetie. We have a story to tell you." They told her everything. The contract, the fake marriage, the moment it became real. Lily listened, wide-eyed. "So, you got married for money?" "At first," Madison admitted, "but it became so much more." Lily looked between them. "That's actually kind of romantic, in a weird way." Ethan laughed. "We'll take it. Do you love each other now?" "More than anything," Madison said. Lily smiled. "Good. Because you guys are disgustingly cute, and I'd hate to think it was fake." They laughed, and Madison felt a profound sense of peace. Their story wasn't conventional, but it was theirs, and it was real. That night, after Lily went to bed, Madison and Ethan sat on the porch swing, just like they had so many times before. Ethan broke the silence. "Any regrets?" Madison looked at him, at the life they'd built, the love they shared. "Not a single one." "Good, because I plan on spending the rest of my life with you." She grinned. "Lucky me. Lucky us." And as the stars emerged above them, Madison realized the truth. Love wasn't about how you started. It was about the choice to stay, to fight, to build something beautiful from the broken pieces. They'd taken a contract, a cold, transactional agreement, and turned it into a love story for the ages. And that, Madison thought, was the most extraordinary thing of all. 10 years after the contract was signed, Madison and Ethan stood in the same law office where it all began. But this time, they weren't there to sign a marriage contract. They were there to finalize the transfer of a substantial portion of their wealth to the Carter Lawson Foundation, ensuring it would continue helping families long after they were gone. The same lawyer who'd presented Madison with the original contract sat across from them, now graying and wearing reading glasses. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said, shaking his head. "You two have come a long way." Madison smiled. "We have." The lawyer slid the papers across the table. "This is incredibly generous. You're sure about this?" Ethan glanced at Madison, then back at the lawyer. "Absolutely. We have more than we need. It's time to share it." As they signed, Madison thought about the terrified girl who'd sat in this very chair a decade ago, desperate and hopeless. She'd never imagined this future. After the meeting, they walked through the city, hand in hand. The air was crisp, autumn leaves swirling around their feet. "Remember when you proposed the contract?" Madison asked. "I was so cold," Ethan admitted. "So focused on solving a problem. You saw me as a problem? A PR problem. But you became the solution to a much bigger problem. Which was loneliness. I didn't even realize how lonely I was until you came along." Madison squeezed his hand. "I was lonely too. Different kind, but still." They stopped at a small cafe, the same one where Ethan had once joked they'd met when he'd made up the story for Victoria Harrington. "Want to make the lie true?" Ethan asked, grinning. "Why not?" They ordered coffee and sat by the window, watching people pass by. Madison's phone buzzed, a message from Lily, who was now in college. "Miss you guys. Can't wait to come home for Thanksgiving." Madison showed Ethan, who smiled. "She's doing so well. Because of you. Because of us." That evening, Back at their house, they hosted a small dinner party. Marcus, Ethan's best friend, was there with his wife. Madison's mother, now healthier and vibrant, sat beside Madison's brother, who'd just finished medical school. As they sat around the table, laughter and stories flowing freely, Madison felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. After dinner, Ethan pulled her aside. "Come with me." He led her to the backyard, where fairy lights twinkled among the trees. In the center of the lawn sat a bench they'd installed years ago, a quiet spot to sit and reflect. "Sit," he said. She did, curious. "Ethan." He sat beside her, taking her hands. "Madison Carter Lawson, 10 years ago, I made you a business proposition, a contract. And you, despite every reason to run, said yes." "I know where this is going," she teased. "You're going to propose again, aren't you?" He grinned. "Actually, yes." Madison laughed. "Ethan, we're already married." "I know, but I want to ask you something different. Will you spend the next 10 years with me? And the 10 after that? And every decade until we're old and gray, and Biscuit the Fourth is stealing our socks?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." He kissed her, soft and sweet, and when they pulled apart, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter. "You know," Madison said, resting her head on his shoulder, "I used to think love was something that just happened to you, like luck. But now I know it's a choice, every single day." Ethan's arm tightened around her. "Best choice I ever made." "Me too." They sat there, under the stars, surrounded by the life they'd built, a life born from desperation and a cold contract, but nurtured by love, trust, and the courage to choose each other, again and again. Inside the house, laughter echoed. Outside, the world was quiet. And in that perfect moment, Madison realized she had everything she'd ever needed. Not the money, not the status, but love. Real, messy, imperfect, beautiful love. And that, she thought, smiling, was worth more than any contract could ever offer. Years later, when people asked how they met, Ethan and Madison would exchange a knowing glance. "It's a long story," Madison would say. "The best kind," Ethan would add. And if pressed, they'd share the truth. About a billionaire who bought a fake wife, about a woman who agreed out of desperation, and about how, against all odds, they fell in love. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories start in the most unexpected places. Even in a law office, with a contract and a desperate hope for something more. And sometimes, just sometimes, hope is enough to build a forever. What did you think of their story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what's your rating? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And check out more emotional stories by clicking on the end screen.